I'm not a lore expert, so I couldn't tell you the relationship between little plague rat boy here, Lord Skrolk, and Nurgle, but certainly in this particular battle, they'll be fighting each other. Today, I've got a Skaven Domination, of course, on Black Ark from Baker Brute. Just wanted to make sure I got that name right. Sorry, guys. Let's go over the starting armies here. He's got Lord Skrolk leading the way, a chieftain, some artillery here, the Plague Clock catapults, warp lightning cannons, couple of gutter runners with poison to protect against Furies, who are already attacking, so we better get to it. Got some Storm Vermin here, the Regiment Renowned Council Guard. Excellent pick in any Domination game, and just most Skaven games in general. Some Skaven Slave Slingers over there for bait. On the Nurgle side, we've got some Furies coming in. I believe one of these is a reserve unit, but we'll get to that in just a minute. A couple of Furies, Festus, a line of Marauders of Nurgle with some Nurglings and Chaos Chariots. Over here, a big force of throwing axes. 4 Marauders with throwing axes, looking all mossy and plagued. Let's get to the reserve armies. 4 Skaven's reserves. They've got a Doom Wheel, the Ixcha's Triads, a Regiment of Renown, 2 Rat Ogres, 2 Globes, a single Warp Fire Thrower, 2 Wolf Rats with Poison, 2 Night Runners, 3 Clan Rats, a single Skaven Slave Slinger, and 3 regular Skaven Slaves for Nurgle. He's got a unit of Knights, a Exalted Hero of Nurgle. Let's see if we can figure out the mount that he's on. 73 speed, no anti-infantry, so it looks like he's on a horse-sized mount. Got 3... Forsaken of Nurgle, 2 Chaos Furies of Nurgle, 2 Plague Toads, a Marauder, and 3 Nurglings. And here we are. So, this Skaven build is pretty interesting. The idea he had was to bully slow, poor Nurgle with artillery, but definitely Furies are a threat. He's got some tools to deal with it. Warlock Engineer here throwing down that Howling Warp Gale to freeze a couple of them in place. One of them does still get through, though, onto the Plague Clock catapults, but Night Runners here also coming out to throw their little shurikens and do some really nice damage to those Furies. I think did the Plague Clock catapults will actually hit them with a contaminated effect, too, in the air. That's pretty impressive, I'm not going to lie. Another Fury does rush in here to fight the Night Runners, of course. Their physical resistance is going to do anything against magical attacks and high offensive stats, relatively speaking, of the Nurgle Furies there. But the other Furies do get fought off. The Chaos Chariots also come in mostly unsupported because the Furies all died, and they're going to have a little bit of a tough time as they pull away. I do like the pick of the Chaos Chariots here, though. They are quite solid chariots in general against the Skaven. Oof, that one gets detonated by the Warp Lightning Cannons, though, as the Furies largely fail to get significant contact. They did deal some HP damage, certainly, but not anything that will change the tide of the battle. Here comes the Marauder Horseman as well, so Nurgle just going all in with the mobility push, try and take out Skaven artillery. Skrolk does a little bit of damage with that Rod of Corruption. It's going to catch some units as they run by, and actually, I haven't taken a look at Lord Skrolk's abilities much since Immortal Empires came out. He's actually got the area of effect Vortex here from Lord Plague, called Plague, which is basically summons a Skaven to like take a dump on your units. It's actually pretty good right now. You guys might be seeing more of it in the upcoming weeks, because it is another stationary Vortex that actually didn't get nerfed in the last patch, but he does have Rod of Corruption, which is okay. The Reinforcement Marker hiding the Liber Bubonicus, which is also okay. Not as good as they once were in Warhammer 2, but still. The Council Guard trying their best to secure these Plague Clock catapults. The Marauders, now the Marauder Infantry getting in, that is. We've got the Ixcha's Triads also out for the Skaven side, so a big, nasty battle developing. Nurgle, you could argue, is overextending here, coming from someone who typically overextends in exactly this fashion on this map. There's an argument that he should just stand back and defend his own objective, continue to reinforce with units there, while capping this side ground objective, considering the Skaven don't have any tools. Those 4 Skaven Slave Slingers got run down by horsemen and chased away, but now we're coming back. Really nice light boil there, too, just detonates some gutter runners. The Council Guard armor, their armor does save them somewhat from the damage there, but still, Nurgle is pushing pretty aggressively here, and now I want to take an opportunity to talk about this Skaven build a little bit and some possible improvements. So I definitely get the idea of trying to bully Nurgle with artillery. But the thing you have to consider, Nurgle actually has a lot of options for mobility now. They've got Poison Warhounds, Furies, a Nurgle, a Horseman. As you saw here, it can be tough to protect. All of these artillery units pretty much are shut down. I mean, there's one Plague Claw crew technically still here. I'm not really sure. The banner's still here, but a much better option is going to be these guys right here, the Poison Wind Globes. Although they do have fairly short range, their armor can help protect them from a little bit of a Fury push. I mean, they're still going to take damage, but they won't get killed quite as quickly as an artillery crew. And the short-range, high DPS explosion damage is quite good against especially demonic units, but just all units in general. It's not going to do as much shock the low armor units as, say, zombie bombers would, but just Triads holding out against some Nurglings here. Let's get some nice cinematics as I kind of talk through this. Looks like we're going to have something in the back there. Another Blight Boil from Festus, getting some really, really nice damage in. But so far, so good. Skrulk's up to 54 kills, some decent value. Skrulk himself is decent enough Lord Choice, but the biggest thing missing here is absolutely a Plague Furnace. I mean, fair enough, Plague Furnace against the Plague faction, but in general, anytime you need to grind out an engagement with Skaven against a very grindy faction, the Plague Furnace is definitely the way to go. Specifically against Nurgle, the lack of anti-large armor piercing, as those Furies get melted there by the explosion damage, and then the damage over time also comes in to do a little bit more, try and bail out that chieftain. But the AoE drain back to the Plague Furnace, and the fact that it's armored, the Nurgle lacks anti-large for the most part. They don't have a lot of great direct answers to it. It is essential in this matchup. I would even go to say an auto pick in this matchup, and in many matchups, in Domination especially, but Nurgle is pushing really hard, just boxing in Skaven on their deployment. And look at this, we've got a duel of the fates. You know, green lightsaber on green lightsaber here, but not that kind of green lightsaber. As it's actually a 3v1, most unchivalrous for Skaven to take this, but still, Skrulk and his cronies just absolutely beating the brakes off of Festus here as he starts to run out of support units and finds himself well alone. Toad's trying to get in there. But, I mean, Nurgle's deployment is so far away at this point, they're going to struggle to get any units in effectively. So, perhaps Skaven can make a little bit of a counter push, but things are looking pretty grim right now. Nurgle can continue to keep them bottled up in this deployment zone. It's going to be a pretty bad time, but if you had the Plague Furnace, especially from the start, this battle would have turned out very differently. You could have maybe even won here. You know, you cut, obviously, a couple of these artillery. Wow, this one's somehow still firing. That's quite impressive. Because, I mean, obviously, as we saw here, Nurgle can push your artillery and shut it down without it really paying for itself. Like, if we take a look, I mean, this Plague Claw Catapult, fairly low value. These other ones I can't select at the moment, but still. Yeah, I just think the Plague Furnace is so essential. Another thing that can be decent is taking a Hackmaster to heal a Molder Monster Blob, and you can just continue to stack Rat Ogres, especially, you know, on top of that blob. Gorich also, if you want to use up another hero slot on that. But at the same time, you know, if you take the Plague Furnace and the Packmaster, that's both of your hero slots used, and then you need to take a caster. Lord Skrulk is a decent option. I personally like the Bell casters a little bit better. Again, especially in this matchup, it gives you an armored single entity that is large and does great AoE damage. Infantry, it doesn't have the drain, but you do have a bound Scorch that will be great against low armor units in particular. And of course, you also get the dreaded 13th spell, which is a great explosion summon, does a huge explosion that is very damaging, and then summons a unit of Storm Vermin on top of that effect. So, finally, the Skaven, though, are able to break out of their deployment, summoning in enough units. These Poison Wind Globes come in here. They're able to rack up 500 value already and pay for themselves. So, even despite, you know, Nurgle kind of interrupting them, getting a direct Fury charge there, they're still able to pay for themselves. And I think that durability and the low cost, combined with the high burst damage, makes them by far the best ranged option for Skaven, especially in Domination, when you're often going to be fighting in kind of cramped, closed conditions on objectives and so forth. But I mean, at this point, Skaven needs to get all three objectives captured as quickly as possible if they want to try and win this game. That being said, Forsaken reinforcing here, they're not going to be that great of a defensive unit. They'll hold for a little bit of time, but there's certainly no, like, Chaos Warriors of Nurgle, for example, over here. Horsemen coming in to fight some clan rats. I mean, that's probably fine, especially if they can block them off of the objective, but we'll see. Gutter Runners, Night Runners, pushing up and around, gonna wheel around probably and try and help out on that objective, or even just disrupt these Forsaken momentarily. I mean, certainly the Skaven are not in a dire position. It's not like the Nurgle player here is in an imminent position to win. Like, he would still need to hold for a decent amount of time. He has time to kind of develop his forces here into a nice cohesive push, not take any really bad engagements against the Forsaken. Just wait till his reinforcements get in range to help. We do have some more Furies coming out, trying to make sure we shut down those warp fire throwers, but I mean, flying units not having any capture weight means when you do invest very heavily, that's what, 2,200 points worth of Furies between reinforcements and the regular army. It's a lot. I mean, granted, you do want them. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. You definitely should from Nurgle's side in this matchup, but at the same time, I think, again, Skaven's build construction could use a little bit of fine-tuning, although the Howling Warp Gill is nice. Of course, you could take Lore of Ruin as well on your Lordcaster if you took a Bellcaster, and you'd still have access to that. Also, Scorch, Crack's Call, really nice AoE damage options as well. Both Skaven lores, I would say, have actually very good AoE damage options. This is one that he's used it a couple of times, and I actually haven't highlighted it here, so there we go. It's a spell you never saw in Total War Warhammer 2. Has a very weird effect. He just, like, is here. This Plague Rat is just here, and then it just kills things, and Skrulk has managed to rack up like 2,000 value fighting Festus in melee and then using that spell a couple of times as well, so it's interesting. I definitely would say you want to take Plague. And if you take a Lord Plague Caster, it might even be better than just spamming summons to just go with the AoE damage at this point in Domination, at least. In land battles, you definitely want to get more summons, because you can't just resummon infinite units from your own deployment. But contrary to what I thought, I did think, you know, seeing some multi-summon builds in early access, I thought they would be pretty oppressive, and I still think they could be in certain matchups, but it seems like the Skaven AoE damage is actually good enough now to compete, which is pretty impressive. Probably take a look at Lore of Ruin on another day. But, yeah, I mean, at this point, Skaven have a triple cap. Nurgle counterattacking onto the one objective here, getting some Nurglings, some Chaos Furies. The Rat Ogres are protecting these two resummoned artillery here, who are now firing down onto that objective, and got Rat Ogres and Night Runners and so forth coming on down. So let's fast forward through this endgame here as the Skaven player closes it out. Guess we could watch Nurglings getting hit by a Plague Claw Catapult and Warp Lightning Cannon, which is kind of hilarious. Like, to think about, like, this Plague Catapult is somehow damaging demons of Plague, but let's not think too hard about the mechanics of how that actually works. I guess if you hit it with a big rock hard enough, it'll probably just fall over, right? Anyway. You would think they should get, like, an Encourage buff rather than a Discourage buff, right? Instead of Contaminated, it actually gives them, like, +10 leadership. That'd be hilarious. Actually very broken, and I don't know if it'd be possible to implement, but it would be hilarious. Little Plague Rat shuffle here as Skrulk comes through to finish out this objective. Rat Ogres coming through. Rat Ogres cost reduction was actually a really nice buff. They went from 800 down to 700, which might not seem like much, but Skaven can make 100 points go a long way. That's almost an entire Skaven slave, so it is a significant difference for a faction with this many cheap units. Looks like we're going to get a little bit of Curse of the Slug here, but at this point, Nurgle is pretty much cooked. I mean, you might try and, like, Vanguard some units, get a cheeky capture on a side objective, but Skaven just have too many units on the field for that to really be viable. And they managed to take home the win. So a nice build. I would say that the Nurgle build's decent. I might make some changes, but overall, the Skaven build definitely has a lot going for it, and it ended up being able to execute at the end. Again, arguable that that's kind of due to Nurgle's mistakes of fighting right on top of the Skaven summon points. They could just keep summoning in units, and especially the catch with the 3 heroes versus Festus. I mean, Festus is very good, but he is just a squishy footlord at the end of the day. You can definitely run in and smash him hard if you have the tools to do so. And these 3 single entities, I mean, I was kind of talking about a different single entity setup, but they all ended up kind of doing their role. Mostly Skrulk, I would imagine. He's definitely not a pushover. I think we'll look at his stats actually in just a minute, but he has got like Frenzy, decent stats to try and fight Festus directly. And considering a lot of the large Nurgle lords aren't really viable here due to Skaven shooting, Festus is probably the most likely option for the time being, and even going forward, given his nerfs. Yeah, Gutter Runners did a great job supporting against the Furies. Ixcha's Triad's a nice, interesting pick. I don't know that I would necessarily take them. Probably just take more of these guys, these Poised Wind Globes instead. Wolf Rats also didn't really highlight them too much, but did a great job helping out in the mobility fight. Night Runners as well. Relatively cheap. I think these guys were resummoned twice. They did pay for themselves, though, which is nice. Clan Rats also providing some value. So really nice Skaven game, actually. As much as I criticize the build, you would need to change some things here. Obviously cut some artillery and whatnot. But anyway, getting over to Nurgle's side, Festus does okay. The horsemen do get through and get some value back, taking down that artillery. But the Furies kind of YOLOing in a little bit unsupported there at the beginning. Could have waited until the horsemen were in a position to help, and it would have been a lot more of a cohesive push. Also waiting until Festus and his own infantry were a little bit closer, because although it feels risky, you know, it feels bad to get hit by artillery. At the end of the day, he really didn't have that many expensive units that he needed to protect from the artillery. Arguably the most expensive thing here, which is the Chaos Chariot, which he also kind of YOLO'd in. A little bit of a mistake there from the Nurgle players' side, but still, definitely was able to get in and smash the Skaven pretty hard, just couldn't quite sustain through to the end. So it's an interesting matchup. You know, I think that the Plague Wagons kind of tilt this slightly in Skaven's favor, but I'd be curious to know what you guys think. Let's go on over to the Skirmish versus AI, and we can take a look here. Yeah, so Lord setup. Packmaster here, you could take him on the Brood Horror if you want. A lot of the time, though, I just take him on foot to make him relatively durable. He's anti-large as well. He's not anti-large AP like the Chieftain is. Not quite as good a stats as the Chieftain, but pretty close. I mean, comparable, certainly. Lack of armor can definitely be a problem. It's one reason why you might want to upgrade to the Brood Horror if you have an extra single entity slot. And yeah, he's not too expensive on it either with just the heal. Again, this minimum kind of stripped down kit, I think, is what you want. Cost matters a lot for the Skaven. And then, let's see here. So, yeah, and then the Plague guy. So this guy, if you're taking Lore of Plague on your Lord, you can honestly just strip him down completely. 1400's about the same you would pay for a Mortis engine, so seems about right for a unit of this type. He also has that contaminated effect, magic damage as well, so it's great against any demon units like Nurglings or Plague Bears. And it also does come with, even with no spells, it does come with a bound Plague Breath, I believe. Yes, Pestilent Breath. So this one here, without the Winds of Magic cost, you can use that without any... I mean, it might do some miscast damage. Yeah, it does have a miscast chance. You might do some damage to himself, but gives him a little bit of extra if he didn't have enough already AoE damage. And then, yeah, Lord choice here. Skrulk is a decent choice. Definitely has a Lore of Plague, which is decent, and some decent abilities. Like I said, reasonable combatant. Doesn't have much armor, but okay attack. 54 attack, magic damage, 45 defense, 400 weapon strength. Not the best AP, but against somebody like Festus, if we go take a look here, I mean, Festus 45, 50, so similar stat line actually. But when you consider the Frenzy, right, Skrulk starts to get that much better. The extra weapon strength, charge, and then of course in that specific situation, supporting single entities, but speed as well. Skrulk having more speed, which of course gets debuffed, while I guess he doesn't have strength in numbers. He just has scurry away, right? So yeah, he'll be able to catch Festus. Whereas the trade-off with the Bell Lord is that he's not going to be able to fight Festus as efficiently. He can kind of knock him around and like throw him out of the blob potentially. But you do have the choice of Lore of Ruin or Lore of Plague. You still get Plague, so you could actually do like Plague and Dreaded 13th, which is a lot of Winds of Magic for both of these. But might not be bad, actually. Or Lore of Ruin, Howling Warp Gale, of course. You've got to freeze flying units. Warp Lightning, also very good against tight pockets of armor. Crack's Call, probably just better overall. Hard to say. It does do quite a bit of damage, and then of course you get dreaded 13th also. So it's an interesting trade-off. You know, you can definitely kit this guy down pretty well also. Musk of Fear is pretty nice too against Nurgle, given that they already kind of lack melee attack to a large degree. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I don't know how many Skaven connoisseurs are left out there at this point, but this is definitely a hero setup I would go with. Again, you can kind of cut some of the artillery pieces and fold the cost into your characters. And then, yeah, and then I think that build might be a little bit better. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, though. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. See you next time.